up to 2,000 meters, which in feet is 6,500 feet. At the walk-around tasting, you're going to have the opportunity to taste wine that the vineyards are at 4,000 feet elevation. So think about the diversity that not only comes from the grape varieties, but from the different climate conditions that we have. From 0 feet to up to 4,000, we have vineyards in the small region of Catalonia. So stay with the message that Catalonia is rich and diverse, okay? Because that's what we're going to be seeing through today's session. Denomination of origin. We borrowed the concept of the French, which is typifying wine by specificity of the regions. So we have 12 denominations of origin, and we're going to be tasting the wines of some of them. Aleya number 1 is the smallest of all, and all the way to Cava, which is the one that produces the most. So we have Conca de Barberà, and if you have not heard of any of those wine regions before, it's okay. I would say most of Catalan people, even wine drinkers, if they're not studying wine, they probably have heard of half of them. So don't get discouraged by the hard pronunciation or by the unknown, because we're always learning new things. So Conca de Barberà, Costers del Segre, Empordà, Montsant, Penedès, Pla de Bages, Priorat, Tarragona, Terra Alta, Catalunya, and Cava. How many of you have heard of Cava before? Probably most of you. How many of you have heard of Priorat? And how many of you, it's not a Catalan region, but how many of you have heard of Rioja? So that happens often, right? Rioja, everybody knows, and Priorat, not as many people know. And there is a very easy explanation, and it's data-driven. Priorat is a very small region, very specific. It has 31 times less vineyard acreage than Rioja. So it's much smaller. In terms of production, it's 70 times less. So by every bottle of Priorat, you have 70 Riojas. Obviously, we're gonna know more about Rioja because it's more accessible, right? But Rioja and Priorat are the only 2 denominations of origin that are qualified. You see the difference here, the OQ, that makes the higher classification of type of wines. The soil, the specificity of the region, it's proven to allow the wine to age, longevity. And that's what makes it more specific. So those are the 12 appellations of wine in Catalonia. Numbers. And of all these numbers, there is probably a couple that are my favorites, but almost 3,000 years of viticulture. The Phoenicians, since the Phoenicians' time, so 3,000 years, 2,700, almost 3,000 years of viticulture history in Catalonia. So tradition is an understatement, right? 8,500 growers and 750 wineries. Why we have more growers than wineries? Can anybody guess? We have more growers than wineries because there is farming tradition. To have a winery is to make wine. That requires a different set of skills. Farming tradition of not only grapes, but all types of agriculture in Catalonia. And those farmers, if they sell the grapes by the weight to wineries, they get some money every year, right? They harvest once a year with grapes, and they get money in their pocket, and they can move on to the next year. If you make wine, now you have to be skilled to make wine or hire someone to do it, have an investment to have a winery, and then worry about selling the wine. So not only you need a different set of skills, you have to be in business to selling bottled wine. So more growers than wineries means that a lot of wineries depend on those farmers to buy grapes. 141,000 acres of vineyards, and I really like that. Every other town in Catalonia has vineyards. So if you go to Barcelona, it takes you 20 minutes to get out of the city, and you can be in a vineyard by the water. So the region is populated with vines, and we have 350 million bottles produced every year within those 12 appellations. Almost half of the vineyards are farmed organically, and that's something that the Mediterranean allows for it. So we have an advantage versus other regions where they have higher, more difficult conditions to farm organically. On the video, they said it's the third industry in Catalonia, the wine. So about 1.3 billion of annual revenue. That's what winemaking generates for the country. Employs 5,000 people directly, but indirectly, altogether about 30,000 people. And we export to 145 countries. I love those pictures here. Those are seashells fossils. And you see at the winery that you were outside Barcelona. And that's not unique to one place. It's in many wineries in Catalonia, you have that, fossils. Grape varieties. If you think of Catalonia is part of Spain, right? If you think of grape varieties, the first thing they kind of think is red, most likely, right? Tempranillo and others. Here you have half of the grape varieties are white. Macabeo is white, Xarel is white, Parellada is white. So almost half of the vineyards in Catalonia are of white grape varieties. Can you think why is that? And I'll give you a little hint with the first wine. We produce and we drink a lot of cava, sparkling wine. So sparkling wine, that's the classic trio of grape varieties that go into cava, Macabeo, Xarel, and Parellada. So that explains why cava last year sold 250 million bottles. So about 2/3 of the wines produced and consumed are sparkling wines, cava. And we'll get into cava because we're tasting two cavas in more detail. Garnacha, Grenache, right? Chardonnay. We have different types of Garnacha. We have Garnacha Negra, Garnacha Peluda, Garnacha Tintorera. So that's a Garnacha Negra, Chardonnay, Merlot, Cabernet. Uri de Yebra is how we say in Catalan, Tempranillo. Samsó, Cariñena is the same, Garnacha Blanca, and then the rest. So you can see the diversification of grape varieties, and that's when we have the rest. Here there are almost 100 different grape varieties, right? So let's get into cava. My idea is we'll talk about the 4 wine regions that we're gonna taste, and then we'll get into tasting if that's okay. If the glass is a little bit warm, room temperature, it's okay because we're tasting, so we wanna get those aromatics out of the glass. They might not be as enjoyable as if you're, outdoors with friends drinking. Like, it will be good for the purpose of today. How it all started in cava. So you see all the DOs, denominations of origin, are within the map of Catalonia. Cava is an exception. In addition to Catalonia, there are other areas in Spain that are allowed to make cava. But 95% of the cava is produced in Catalonia. And the capital of cava is Sant Sadurní d'Anoia. It all started 150 years ago. A farmer in Penedès decided to experiment and using the traditional method of champagne, second fermentation in the model, with the local indigenous grape varieties to make wines. And that's what, gave the birth to cava. So since then, there has been many cavas produced, and a new classification came 2020 that was approved by the regulatory of cava, but by the Spanish government was approved in 2021. And that differentiates different areas. And there was a couple of producers that pulled out of the appellation because it's so massively produced cava that they wanted to distinguish themselves. As a result of that, you may have heard of Corpinat, classic Penedès, not just cava, right? Conca la Ribanoia. So that created a mini revolution that made a lot of people unhappy in Catalonia when it comes to regulations and government. So a good consequence of that is this result. Now they have 5 subzones within Barcelona, which we're gonna taste 2 cavas from Valls d'Anoia Foix. So now you can be more specific of where the cava is from and the rest of the Spain. New styles, regulations for cava. Cava that what? So to be cava, two main rules, and there are many, many more, but needs to follow the traditional method of champagne. So if you're drinking a pet nat, cannot be a cava, right? That nat is made with an ancestral method. From the beginning, the first fermentation takes place in the bottle. So cava is traditional method. The other one is to age at least 9 months. Second fermentation in the bottle for 9 months, and that's what makes cava de guarda. If we say superior, is reserva, minimum 15 months, Gran Reserva 30, and Paracha 36. And there are many, many cavas that age for 10 years, second fermentation. So now you have 100, 120 months of aging, giving a lot of depth to the wine, and they still label as Gran Reserva Paracha qualification. And Rosat. You add, is the choice of the maker to add sugar, right? So when there is no added sugar and the residual sugar is less than 3 grams, is a Brut Nature. We're gonna taste one Brut Nature today. That will be the second one. Then extra Brut all the way to Dole. So you can see you can have 0.6, 0.8, less than 1 gram of sugar per liter in the bottle, up to 50. So that gives the different types of cava. In white grape varieties and red grape varieties. So it's quite limited. You'll see in other GOs, they have many grape varieties allowed. So Macabeo would say is the predominant, with Xarel·lo Emparellada, Chardonnay and Subirat Parent. And then for reds, we have Garnacha Negra, Trapaz, Monastrell, and Miganolar. 205 wineries are making cava. And I would say in Detroit, we have the big three, Ford, General Motors, and what used to be Chrysler. In cava, they also have the big three. They have Codorníu, Freixenet, and Jaume Seba, right? So those, although we have 205 wineries, 3 are the ones that take most of the production of cava. Penedès. Penedès, think of the Mediterranean. So it's all this area here. It's a cooler, mild, warm climate. That's the region in Catalonia that has the longest history of viticulture. The 2,700 years that we're talking about, it all landed in Penedès. Very special about Penedès that is new is by this year's harvest, 2025, if you bottle your wine with the DO Penedès, it's gonna be organic. Up to this vintage, 2024, 70% of the farms have achieved that, but by this year, it's gonna be one of the mandatory regulations. So Penedès, they wanna be the first appellation in the world that everything is organic. Everything? 100%? Yeah, it will be. That's one of their rules that they're imposing. And they have been, gradually, yes.
I'm sorry, I was gonna ask you, in Europe, are a lot of the farms and wineries, are a lot of them already organic and clean? Like compared to America? Or like what's the environment out like there? Like, is there a lot of pesticides in wineries out there?
So let's go back for a minute. 1936 to 1939, a civil war that ended up with a dictatorship, Industrial Revolution, European Union. So a lot of historical events. And history determines the circumstances of life, like it's happening right now, right? Everywhere. So our grandparent generation in Spain, in Catalonia, they farm by circumstances to survive. Our parents' generation, they wanted to progress. They got grants from the EU and they planted New World grape varieties and tried to make wine to produce as much productivity. So pesticides, herbicides, let's look to make more, to progress, to make money. My generation and the younger generation, they are actually in a pristine moment, in my opinion, because they have the luxury of choice. Everything is pretty much given to them as a canvas with a lot of depth, the soil. So it's easier to be organic today and to have your own point of view because we have received a lot from our previous generations. So there is a lot of organic going on because there is this desire of respect to nature, and it's easier to do it in the Mediterranean. But if we go, talking Catalan wines today, But to answer your question, if we go to Galicia, that it rains 300 days a year, it's not easy. So we are more fortunate by nature to be organic. And yes, there is a big push and trend by younger generation that they are farming by choice, that they want to respect nature and they want to contribute to the environment. So ICC, I would say without having numbers in front of me, my answer is yes, with some more, but more than European, I would say Mediterranean. So you can see wine grain varieties, there is a ton of them, red as well. I'm not gonna read them one by one, but if you have any questions, that's what's been planted there. So that's what's allowed. And there are 150 wineries in Penedès. Montsant is an interesting appellation. It's number 5 here, and it's around Halagora, number 9. So it's the newest appellation, denomination of origin in Catalonia. Before it was a sub-zone of the Tarragona. And then we're gonna go into Priorat in a minute. Priorat is the one that is inside of Montsant. So smaller, more specific. There are 95% of the vineyards are red grape varieties, with Garnacha Negra and Periviena mainly. Then there is some Tempranillo with Ginebra, Syrah, Merlot, Cabernet, and then Garnacha, Macabeo. 59 wineries today. When they started as a DO 24 years ago, there were only 20. So it's a lot of farmers are making their own wine now in Montsant rather than selling the grapes to other people. And we get to Priorat. Priorat goes back to the 12th century. If you've seen any pictures of Priorat, you see the monastery of Scala Dei, the monks that arrived there from Provence. What's interesting for me, Priorat nowadays, is that they are the first place in Spain that are allowing for village wines. So I call it, that's my own terminology, the Burgundification of Priorat. Now they are looking at specific parcel per parcel. So up until now, 2007, all the wines were DOQ Priorat. Now you can have a Vida Villa, which Villa means village, right? Town. Vida Parache is a single vineyard. Viña Clasificada is what I would say the equivalent to a cru. And Gran Viña Clasificada, Grand Cru. This is very positive. This is very positive because now we're paying attention to the specifics of the conditions of each parcel to differentiate and to be more detailed about what we're doing. So I would say I hope to see more of that in every appellation in Spain. Yes.
So when they start doing sub-appellations and separating it down, who writes that?
The Consejo Regulador.
So
Yes.
Catalan, those folks are the ones that write
Yes.
the new law.
Yes. Yeah, it's the DOQ Priorat. So that's the administration part of the appellation. Yeah.
How long is it usually if I say, hey, I want to take a single vineyard and turn it to a cru?
So Priorat, and maybe someone that works in Priorat has a different opinion, but my experience is not as difficult. Bureaucracy is always on the way, but because it's such a small area, it's easier. And everybody knows pretty much everybody, and the head of the administration is also a farmer. So you don't have big companies or corporations that are trying to prevent from that happening. Because when that happens, you differentiate. Differentiation is good, in my opinion, right? But when you have big corporations, then you find more difficult to do that. Because now when you differentiate, they are a different, category, and they probably don't want that. So in Penedès will be more difficult than it is in Priorat, and that's just my opinion. 115 wineries, which is quite impressive for such a small place. And with that, we're gonna start with tasting. Yeah, before we start, please, three S's. Smell, sip, and spit. Don't drink. Okay? Smell is the first taste that we're gonna get of the wine, right? Then we're gonna sip and we're gonna look for the taste of the wine. So let's start with the first wine. So when we smell, we get the olfactive, right? And the olfactive is through the nose, but it's also in the mouth. You have the grape varieties that we were talking earlier, Macapeu, Xarel·lo, and Parellada. This is from the Barcelona, Valls de Núria Foix. It's Reserva. Reserva is minimum by law required to be 18 months. They, this family property, they do always minimum 22. But what's really nice about the two cavas that we're gonna taste today, they're both vintage, which is not a requirement by the appellation, and they're both put the disgorgement date on the label. And what does that mean, the disgorgement date? That's how fresh it is, right? When you sip, you get the true taste, right? The true taste, you're gonna associate sour with acid, right? So you think this wine has good acid? I think it does, yeah. We're gonna associate a sweetness to sugar. And when we, at least my mind, that's the way it works. When I read information, then I get the S, right? Because now I know it's 6 grams per liter of sugar, so it's gonna be on the sweeter profile. But I think it has good fruit expression, that it doesn't feel very sweet. And then we look for stringency, which is tannins, which in this case, fermentation, you know, they press and ferment, so there isn't much of contact with the skin. So we should not find much of that stringency in the cava. I would say we go to the second cava and we'll go back and forth. Maybe we'll comment if we see any differences, but both are Reserva, both are Guarda Superior. Both are from the same contact. They're two different family properties. This is Brut versus Brut Nature. They're both same vintage, which is 21. You had it? Yeah. Yes, I have. Yes. Pardulina is a property that dates back to 1729, and that's not unusual in Catalonia. You have farmers that are 21st generation, 24th generation in the state. So they have been in the property since 1729. Xarel·lo, Macapeu, Parellada, and this one has a little bit of Chardonnay. And they have Chardonnay because it's in the vineyard. Both are well balanced, and please, if you disagree, it's you know, in my opinion, both are well balanced and good expression of the fruit. A little bit more crisp, the second one than the first, and I associate that to basically the sugar content.
Is there a growth of cava producers going down to less than one or going dry? That segment of it likes it growing.
You know, I thought it was a few years ago, but I don't see it as much as I thought it would. So they worry about making the base wine as good as possible, and then before they bottle, they decide if they're gonna add, and it changes year to year, vintage to vintage. I think probably it is because we haven't talked about climate change, but the Mediterranean was very hard hit with drought for vintages. You know, 2019 was terrible, in 20, 21, 22, 23. So 5 years of severe drought to the point that there was no water for, you know, the villages to run, not just for farming. So the vines have really suffered and they have to adjust. So probably that's why less production and more pressure to just have a wine that, tastes as good as possible. So, but I would love to see that, trend of less sugar content in sparkling wine personally.
That's really 0.1%. It's pretty dry. And depending on the method of analysis, you'll record that even though what you're measuring is not sweetness. So that's really a bone shot.
Yeah, it's 0.6 grams. This one in particular, 0.6 grams of sugar per liter. It's whatever is, residual, and it's nothing. And often people say, is this dry? And I have to say, no, it's not dry. It's not sweet, but it's not dry because it has a beautiful fruit expression. It doesn't come across to my palate as dry. But everything is very, subjective to what we associate with dry and with, right? Would you think it's a dry wine in the palate?
The second one?
Second one.
Absolutely.
We were saying back here that the first one, Black Coca, if that water should have the first one was burnt, so the second one with theirs. Cabernet just has like a little more complex. So what's going on? The person kind of like, right?
Yeah, you have more texture, so you bite it more to sit down and enjoy with food, right? Remember, 2/3 of the wine consumption and production in Catalonia is sparkling wine, is cava. So next time you open a bottle of sparkling wine, just drink it through an entire meal, not just as an appetizer. And if you're not, cooking seafood or fish, it's okay, with any pasta dish, even with a lamb shank. The acidity of the sparkling wine, I think, is very versatile when it comes to pairing with food. So think of sparkling as always you safeguard for pairing. So far, we're good with the two wines?
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Okay. So we'll move to our first white. Blanc de Pax. 2023 vintage. That takes us to Penedès. We're going to have the next three wines from Penedès. Blanc de Pax is the first wine that Parés Balta made. Parés Balta has been in the state for more than 2 centuries. And that's the wine that got them started. You see organic wine, biodynamic farming, and vegan, right? And often people think all wines are vegan because it's grapes. Do you know why some wines are not vegan? When they clarify, they may use some components that come from animals. So, Parellada, Macabeo, and Xarel·lo. This is clean.
Can you provide examples of any non-organic wines or non-vegan, I should ask you?
It will be basically not only producer by producer, by vintage. So some wines are now vegan, but they were not 2 vintages ago, because when they clarify and they filter, they may use those, and I don't know the right word in English, but the fish bone, right, the membrane.
Yeah.
Also, some that use the part of the egg.
Egg whites.
Yeah, thank you. Egg whites. So if the wine is unfiltered, you can assume it's it's gonna
They
be
might also use gelatin,
gelatin. You're right. Yes. Yeah.
and that's pig.
Yeah. So to be certain about it, you have to know the source, the producer, and be very diligent about vintage by vintage and wine by wine.
Sturgeon, they generally use sturgeon from Turkey.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah. So if it says it's vegan, then you can trust. If it doesn't say, it doesn't mean that it's not. But if that's something that is important to you, my recommendation, go back to the source, do your, not only reading, but research and verify, because it's very specific to each wine and each vintage. It's not like a winery, it's all, vegan, and then next door is not vegan. It's the decisions that they make based on, what they want to profile in the wine.
You say this.
So we have thought about the true taste, right? The sweet and sour. What about the taste sensations, right? It gives you an idea of the alcohol, the weight, right? The viscosity. So when you have the wine in the palate, all those sensations are also gonna give you a profile of the wines. What would you drink this wine with?
Because or nice like free salad and pears and apricots.
I would do even a chicken breast.
Yeah.
I'd probably poach it in the wine.
Yes. Yes. What about if you were on the sea in Barcelona and you're drinking this wine with a paella? Do you know what paella is? The rice dish? Yeah. That will go very nicely, right? Yes. All right. We'll move to the next one. And you can see the alcohol percentage is very low. I personally appreciate that because I like to drink wine every day. As I should. The next wine, number 4. It's from a different winery, Celler Credo. 50-year-old vines. This is 100% Xarel·lo. That's become quite interesting and trendy in Barcelona. If we were all together at a wine bar in Barcelona today, you'll probably have like 6. I don't like to use the word good. I think it's overused, but a wine bar that really specializes in good wine, right? You may have like 6 Xarel·los to choose from. And the same bar, 15 years ago, there will be none. It became really a trend amongst young winemakers to show the potential of older vines of Xarel·lo. So here we have 50-year-old vines of Xarel·lo, single variety. Xarel·lo traditionally has been used as a blend for cava, but also as a table wine, and often blended with muscat. When Xarel·lo is from older vines, tends to have nice nose, but also good depth. And I say Xarel·lo is my way to go for people that they say they only drink red wine. And I say, okay, try this white wine. And if it's a wine that it also fermented and aged in the Burgundian style, which some producers are doing that in Catalonia, then it's a good way to introduce them to a white wine. I put here good acid makes you salivate because it's a good way to say, it makes you salivate and invites you to the next sip. And that's always a good sign for me in wine. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Are we ready to move to an orange wine? So far, 4 of 4. Everybody likes the wines? Yes? So is, yeah. Well, that's just a small representation of how, wines sees in Catalonia. It's Thank you. So, what does orange wine mean? And I put it in a very simple way. Is white made like red. Generally speaking, even when we have a red grape variety, if we squeeze it, the juice is clear, right? How do they make red wine? Is with the skin contact. So here you have white grape variety, Xarel·lo 90%, and then they have skin contact with the Xarel·lo skin, but they also use the skin from another wine that they made from a different grape variety to bring it to this orange color. So that's become more of a trend in the US. Orange wine, I say, it's nothing new. The Jura has been making this for here and ripe for many years. So it's the terminology of orange wine, but think of Jura in France, and that's a good example of what orange wines are. Older vines, organic, biodynamic, vegan. And obviously here, if they make an orange wine, they want the tannins to be, the main players in the wine.
But would you add the red skin to this one also? It's not only the white skin.
This one is white skin.
Nice white. Was
Yeah.
you talk about the red skin?
No, it's only two grape varieties, the Chalero.
They are white.
Yeah, and the
Always
yeah.
have to be the white skin. But they add from another grace.
No, not in this one. No, not in this one. No. So far we had Chalero with the sparkling wine. We had Chalero with the two white. We had Chalero with this orange wine. Say Chalero, and often when we study wine, you want to find like the key words of how to identify the grape variety. And I don't want to, discourage anyone, but I think it's quite difficult and often it's quite personal, right? We say smells like this, but an apple smell to me that I grew up in Barcelona different than my daughter that grew up in Michigan, right? I never was exposed to honeycrisp apples and shit. And that's, for her, that's what an apple is. And for me, it's not, right? So it's very subjective. Also, I like to use this analogy, a grape variety, whatever it is, Merlot, Chareno, it's like saying chicken. It's a wide range, right? It's Kentucky Fried Chicken, or it's chicken tikka masala, or it's a roasted chicken from, a chicken that you raised. So there is gonna be some commonalities, but when you taste wines, it's a lot of practice and a lot of focus. So take notes. If you like the subject, take notes, read a lot, taste a lot, which doesn't mean that you drink a lot. And try to find your own way to identify things, because I find it myself quite difficult. So you are, at the beginning of a beautiful road that I think you're never gonna stop learning and being wrong often. And that's okay, right, Professor?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I notice this seems to be unfined.
Yes, and it is actually big time. And some of the bottles were, I don't know if this one is, but yeah, like this one, for example. Mm-hmm. And you can pass around that bottle. If you are in the hospitality business, that might seem wrong, right? So you have to explain to the guest at the restaurant that actually is not a fault. It's by design. They don't want to put the wine through stress of filtering. Mm-hmm. Because filtering, what it means is a lot of pressure through a very small surface, right? Mm-hmm. To get rid of the sediments. So if you see that in a bottle, and you may see it more in red wines, right? Mm-hmm. If the wine tastes good, there's nothing wrong with it.
Absolutely.
Yeah. All right, ready for the reds? And this. Yes.
What is the price range of the bottles we drink so far?
So I'm gonna guess because I don't know, but I'm gonna tell you something maybe not specific to those wines, but in the U.S. with imported wines, okay, if you pay $25 a bottle, you deserve to drink a very good wine, okay. If you want to pay 40, if you want to spend 60, if you want to spend 60 and 80, then you're getting, and you're gonna get also a very good bottle, but more specific. Something that, either you're gonna really enjoy it at this moment, or you can keep it for a long time. what I recommend is buy at a retailer, a wine shop where you can have a conversation, not buy off the shelf, unless you know what you buy already because you have consumed it before. Do a lot of reading. It's very easy nowadays. Websites are full of good information. So if you pay less than 20, you can still have a good wine, but your chances are lower. 20, 25, you gotta have an excellent wine, a wine that is well made, that is balanced, that expresses a sense of place. And I always say it's wine, we talk about briefly liquid geography, right? It expresses a sense of place, but always through the point of view of maker. The people that make the decisions in the vineyard and the people that make the decisions in the winery, they have something in mind that they want to achieve. They work hard to get the most expression out of the grape. And then they use their techniques, it's all stainless steel, like this wine. What am I gonna age some in, French oak? Am I gonna use a 225-liter barrel or 400 or 500? All those things that they're gonna choose is gonna determine how the wine tastes. But don't think you can only drink good wine if you pay $50. It may happen for, other regions, but not for wines from Catalonia.
Spanish wines are generally a marvelous market.
They are.
They tend to be very good, and they also tend to be not very expensive.
Yeah, that's.
I would suspect you could get almost all of these for $15, no more than $25. And that's good.
Yep.
What's the perfect pairing with the orange?
Yes.
What is the perfect pairing
What would be the perfect pairing?
with the orange?
So I'm gonna say I would like to have it with a white pork sausage and white beans, something that is like more like barbecue type of a thing, like a pork sausage that has a lot of flavor. I'm thinking it's
Grilled pork chops.
grilled pork chops, so something that is meaty, that I'm in the mood for drinking a wine that is not red wine. So that would go. The white beans, I think, will add a lot of protein to the wine in a good way. So that I will go for something very basic, just like olive oil, salt, maybe parsley, but just basic to the flavors of the meat and the beans. We call it butifarra a la catalana. Yeah. So we have 3 reds to taste, 1 from Monsant and 2 from Priorat. If you remember earlier in the presentation, Monsant was part of a Dio Tarragona, a larger area, was a subzone called Falset, and in 2001 became their own appellation. And then Priorat is even smaller than Monsant. Cariñena, Garnacha Negra, and Garnacha Peluda. I would say if you think Cariñena and Garnacha as the quintessential grapes of that area, 95% of the vineyards are red grape varieties. And on the walk around tasting, we'll have the opportunity to taste this same producer white wine version. This is the one that we asked to chill a little bit earlier, because it was, I don't like red wine when it's a little bit more the temperature. I think it's tasting better now than earlier, yeah. Long finish, quite tannic, right?
But supple.
Yeah, subtle.
Yes, they're not harsh. They're well mellow.
Yes, and I often use the words of delicacy, subtle, elegance, that they're not opposite to complexity.
Correct.
Right? So you can be, very feminine, very subtle, very delicate.
You can also add silky.
Yes. So that's, for me, that's the key in a good wine, to find first well balanced, high in aromatics, so it gives you a lot of expression, and then that subtlety in the palate. And one seed and the next one is gonna give you different expressions of the grape. I had once a producer, a wine producer, a farmer, tell me, and I use it all the time. She said, Nuria, all I want to do is my wine to whisper to people. And I'm, wow, okay. And it makes a lot of sense when you drink a wine, you know, and it's whispering to you, sip after sip, glass after glass, and it doesn't stop telling you things. That's a good wine, right?
Right? So, yeah. If somebody's sitting on the roof.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. Yeah, and you may find some wines from Catalonia that are, you know, overpowering and heavy, but it's uncommon. You're gonna find more this profile of wines that are expressive and delicate for the most part. Even if they age in oak, they are very measured about how to use that in the winemaking. And we're gonna move to the last two. I think we're doing okay with time. We're gonna space back and forth last two because both are from Priorat. So number 7 is the 2PR from Gratavinum, so it's the same winery. And number 8 is Silvestris.
Okay.
I want to taste them sort of like side by side because I am always fascinated by the idea that they come from the same place, made by the same people, and you have two different expressions of the base. So those are wines that in both cases they play with the vinification of the wine, with stainless steel, with French oak, and also with amphora. Can you taste in the palate that the alcohol is higher, right? So Priorat is known for the type of soil that you may have heard that term of llicorella, which in English is black slate. That's very particular to Priorat, to the point that when you're going to Priorat, to get to Priorat, you gotta be first in Montsant, because Priorat is a tiny little dog inside Montsant appellation, and you can see the soil that it changes. So black slate. The older vines of Priorat, the roots are up to 20, 30 feet. It's an area that is very difficult to grow vines. And it's been even more difficult. Priorat and Penedès in general work really hard in the past few years because of the climate change and no rain at all. Yeah. Last year in February, I went home to Barcelona, and the train stations, the streets, like everywhere, there were those advertisements by the guard that it says, with an empty bucket, it says, it's not raining, it's not coming from nature. Oh. So you will have like a bucket in your bathtub in every hotel when you start running the water before it's warm to use that water for your, toilet. Because they were shutting down water supply in many towns in Catalonia at certain times. So that's how severe it was, the drought. So imagine the plant that is suffering all that year after year. So in Priorat, there is a risk that if it doesn't rain good in the next 3 years, some plants may not be able to make it. So between the 2PR, is number 7, and the Silvestris, you see the colors are completely different, right? They're both the same vintage, 2021. The second one is mostly Carignana with some Syrah and lower in alcohol. While number 7, it has more Garnacha and Carignana, and then you also add some Syrah and Cabernet. Can you tell the depth of the wine? these red wines being a little bit more, serious than the previous one. Do you have a favorite between number 7 and number 8? Number 7?
Remember you rate? Yeah, we're not right.
So it's
I think our meals. What is this a big good terries for those?
So those for me they're calling like grilled meat. I am a big fan of lamb chops. I'm also a big fan of quail. Yeah, so I would roast some potatoes with a little bit of rosemary and just have the grilled meat. Also, we have a type of stew called fricando, and you can go later, like Fricando, fricando. It's a stew of very thin beef meat with mushrooms and tomato sauce, and it's the type of dish that my grandma made, and my mom hasn't made as much, and now I'm not making it for my daughter because it's So for my birthday, like that's what I would make. Because it's great, and then you have the bread and you soak on the sauce, it's like, but that's the type of dish that we see less and less even in restaurants, in local restaurants in Catalonia. So I would have a good fricando with those tricks and wines, yeah. So share with me some of your impressions, and I would really appreciate, I know it's few of you, but what are you taking away from today's tasting? If you want to just say one word,
I
and
like
if you don't
red
want to,
wine.
yeah.
That's always me.
You want to go to Catalonia? Yeah. So I would say that.
Big success.
Yeah.
The packaging is very modern. It's like if I was going to compare it to like Italian packaging. Yeah, it's the labels are very slick and minimalist and very modern.
Yes. Yeah. Yes. That's good. Yeah. Thank you. Yeah. What else?
Name do
Spark. You like spark?
do first from below.
So who can say one of the grape varieties that we tasted that you were not familiar with before today? And just say, huh? No, I don't say, I mean, every day I struggle with English. So please.
The first one is fantastic.
Uh-huh.
Had my favorite though, but
But what were they made from?
Yeah, just
Made from?
yeah. I wanna hear, and you don't say right. I mean, you're talking to someone that I don't say right. Most of my words in English. So, be brave. But I want you to remember at least one grape variety from today.
Sarinara.
Parallana. Molt bé.
Right, we said that we might know as Tempranillo.
Ull de llebre. It's hard to.
And was that in Mexico, the ones that we...
No. Oh no. Okay. So it was not. No. We had the red one. You had Cariñera and Garnacha, and then so Syrah and Cabernet. But basically they were Cariñera and Garnacha driven. Yeah, Cariñera and Cariñan. But ull de llebre. It's hard to say. Tempranillo.
Number 8 has just a hint of sulfides, and it adds a complexity to the wine that number 7, which is cleaner, doesn't have. So real low levels of sulfides are actually a good thing. High levels of sulfides are a bad thing. But this is marvelously done. And the wines in general are marvelous. So thank you for that.
Oh no, thank you.
Surprisingly available to the good nature and the other one.
Wonderful. Yeah.
Compared to another orange wines.
Yeah, the if you go into their website, Pares Balta, and maybe I should have put a slide with those so you guys can present, but I can always email that. You are very fortunate to live on today's times because there is a lot of information available on the internet. So they have a very nice website with English. You can download their tech sheets, you can see their story, but it's a solid wine producer, Pares Balta, in Penedès. So they make good wines. And the second Cava by Dulina, they also do. But who wants to say Xarel·lo? So you see an X, but the pronunciation is more like S-H, Xarel·lo. That's one of the grapes, yeah, that we tasted a lot today. Sparkling wine, the quintessential. I'm gonna end the session saying that in every household in Catalonia, when you open the fridge next to the cava, you see the milk. So I always joke and say it's my milk. So on Sunday, if you're home and you're not driving, have a good brunch, whether it's lox and bagels or a greasy omelette with sparkling wine, preferably from Catalonia. And enjoy it very much throughout the entire, breakfast brunch, because I think it's the best combination of the week for me.
Sounds good.
Yes. Any questions? Anything else that I can offer? Yes.
If you had described in one sentence why Catalonia is different than other wine regions, what would you?
Why it's different than other geographical areas? I think to capture, that will go to the first slides where I said it's rich and diverse. You don't have many regions that farm with 4 different types of climates, with so much different altitudes, with so many indigenous grape varieties. So we're fortunate by heritage and by geography. And then the people that are making the wine, right? Now, I think there is an interesting wave of younger people that are farming by choice with pride. And that's making the wines that we're drinking today. Because you can have the raw material, right? But if you don't have the people to make it, so we always talk about soil, terroir, climate and all that. But don't forget the most important element for me is the visionaries behind the wines, so the people, but rich and diverse. So, if you take that away just from today's tasting, that we are, a territory very rich and very diverse, then I've done well.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you.
Fabulous. First of all,
Yes.
we had late, we didn't start on time and you finished early. So that's amazing. That's amazing.
I got a helper. Actually, I asked her if she would let me know when it was 1:30.
Oh, okay.
So,
okay.
yeah, so we were coordinated.
Good. So what did you think, everybody? Thank you so much for sharing your knowledge, very deep. And what she said about the diversity is really an important point about a particular wine region. There are so many wine regions around the world that are known for one wine, one variety, and this is really one of the unique points. And there's really something for everyone, right? We had 8 wines today. We had sparkling, we had white, we had an orange wine, and we had 3 different red wines. So we want to thank you for coming. I want to remind everybody that there is now a wine and food tasting out on the patio. There are additional producers out there. There is a chef who is
Alba. Yeah, Chef
Alba, who is
Alba.
also
Yeah.
Catalana. And she's making a very traditional but delicious dish called pan colgrat.
Yeah.
Which sounds really simple, but it's actually divine. And there's cheese, charcuterie, and all sorts of other things out there. So don't leave. I want to point out, for those of you that work in the trade, you probably know what this is, but not everyone does. So there's one at your seat and there's one in your bag when you pick it up on the way out. It's called, the brand name is Drop Stop, but it's also just foil, Albert, what do you call these? Pour spouts, yeah. But what it does is it prevents your wine from dripping when you are pouring. So it doesn't get on your tablecloth, it doesn't get on your tasting mat. It's an ingenious little device. It doesn't look like it does anything, but it does a lot. So don't leave this behind. And then last but not least.
So on behalf of the School of Hospitality and the Medal d'Or Wine Studies Program and Dr. Gunt's class, we want to say thank you again. He's wonderful presentation.
Well, If you ever come to Detroit, send me an email. It's a fantastic city. And if you want to go to Barcelona, and I really mean it, if you want to go to Barcelona within 10 years, send me an email and I'll be happy to facilitate some contacts. Te produce. Thank you. Gracias. Stay. See?
I'm going to do it. So has it? And probably will.